Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Al 24 News, Nightly News. I'm Marim Zian, and here are your headlines. Algerian rescue teams continue their mission following the devastating flood that hit neighboring Libya, as fears that the death toll may reach 20,000 people. The tiny Italian island of Lampedusa is facing a surge in migrant boats from North Africa after numbers peaked at 7,000 people. And the Russian presidency said President Vladimir Putin has gratefully accepted North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's invitation to visit North Korea. Welcome to the news. As you followed in our top stories, Algerian rescue teams continue their mission following the devastating flood that hit neighboring Libya. A statement from the Algerian Civil Protection said the Algerian rescue teams succeeded to find 5 bodies that were flood victims. This comes as fears that the death toll in the disaster may reach 20,000 people. The Libyan Red Crescent said the death toll in the city of Derna has soared to more than 11,000. 9 other thousand are still missing. An urgent meeting was held at Libyan Council headquarters between the President of the Council, Mohammed Al-Manfi, and the head of the Audit Bureau, Khaled Shakshak, to talk about the impacts of the floods that hit several cities and regions of eastern Libya, according to a statement by the Presidential Council. The same source added that during the meeting, both officials emphasized the need to take all necessary measures to overcome obstacles and lessen suffering among citizens, as well as to prepare all paperwork supporting the public prosecutor's investigations into the 2 collapsed dams in the city of Derna and the delay of international relief efforts. And the Libyan House of Representatives voted unanimously to allocate an emergency budget worth $2 billion to address the catastrophic effects of the floods. The Council's official spokesman, Abdullah Belhik, said after an emergency session devoted to the situation in Derna and the affected coastal cities that the members also agreed to form a committee entrusted with opening an account in the Libya's central bank in which local and international allocations or aid would be deposited and monitoring their expenditure to help the victims.
The Council of Representatives agreed in today's session on a number of important decisions, foremost of which is the unanimous decision of the Council of Representatives to set up an emergency fund worth 10 billion Libyan dinars to address the flood's impacts in the affected areas. Second, to form a committee under the presidency of the Speaker of the Council of Representatives and the membership of the Governor of Libya's Central Bank and the membership of a representative of the High Command of the Armed Forces, whose candidacy will be submitted by the High Commander of the Armed Forces. This committee will be entrusted with opening an account at Libya's Central Bank in which local and international allocations or aid would be deposited and monitoring their expenditure as required.
And Libya's tragic floods have claimed thousands of lives and left the residents of the city of Derna facing the threat of potential epidemics, while thousands of others remain unaccounted for. Marwa Balawar.
Rescue workers in the devastated Libyan city of Derna have appealed for additional body bags after a catastrophic flood caused by Storm Daniel killed thousands of people and swept many out to sea. The situation is raising concerns about potential health hazards stemming from the decomposition of bodies still in the flood waters and under rubble.
Numbers of deaths, missing and displaced people are now increasing. The current situation is catastrophic. It is a tragic disaster. All numbers are increasing. I think that the number of deaths has now exceeded 10,000 or 11,000 people. The number of missing people reached about 20,000. The number of displaced people currently in the Red Crescent and Scout shelters is around 3,000 people, distributed on 6 or 7 shelters around the city. The supplies are arriving and have not stopped. However, the disaster is bigger than the amounts of supplies.
Sea patrols were working along the coast, trying to locate washed-up bodies, many of which were being taken to Tobruk for potential identification.
There is a big number of bodies in the sea. There are around 2,000 bodies in the sea, and because the weather is now good, we still see there are bodies in Shahat, Martuba, Marzam because of the strong winds blowing that night. This is what we saw with our bare eyes. We were at the Red Crescent airport and the force of the wind was strong. We are still pulling bodies from houses and from under the rubble up to this moment. We are still pulling bodies from houses and from under the rubbles up to this moment. Works continue to pull bodies from under the rubble.
Hundreds of people were all buried together in one grave because it was necessary to burn all the bodies in order to stop the spread of illness. Residents of Derna have been clamoring for the construction of a new field hospital because the town's 2 existing hospitals have turned into makeshift cemeteries. Of Derna have been clamoring for the construction of a new field hospital because the town's 2 existing hospitals have turned into makeshift cemeteries.
The head of the United Nations Weather Agency suggested that most of the deaths in the catastrophic flooding that devastated Libya over the weekend could have been averted if proper early warning systems have been put in place. WMO has long promoted the need for better and more extensive early warning systems across the globe to help brace for the impact of natural disasters.
Yes, so that's a conclusion that if there would have been a normally operating meteorological service, they could have issued the warnings and also the emergency management authorities would have been able to carry out evacuation of the people, and we could have avoided most of the human casualties. Of course, we cannot fully avoid economic losses, but we could have also minimized those losses by having proper services in place.
And the death toll from the terrible earthquake that hit central Morocco last Friday has sadly risen to 2,946 people, as reported by the Moroccan Ministry of Interior. The number of injured individuals has reached 5,674, and for the 6th consecutive day, rescue operations and the research or the search for missing persons continue. Medical teams are addressing cases of broken bones, injuries, and shock due to building collapses. And according to the UNICEF, around 100,000 children have been affected by the earthquake. Central Morocco was jolted awake on Thursday morning by a 4.8 magnitude aftershock, adding the terror experienced by residents across several regions. Meanwhile, for the 7th consecutive day, search and rescue teams persisted in their efforts to search neighborhoods buried beneath the rubble in villages and areas severely impacted by last week's earthquake. Hossam Berkan.
Fear permeated in the air as the ground trembled beneath their feet, prompting evacuation for the safety of all. Aftershocks disrupted the search for survivors, buried under the remnant of a catastrophic earthquake, an event unseen in Morocco for over 6 decades.
Our pleas to the authorities have fallen on deaf ears. Electricity remains cut off, and the tent we have is too small. We desperately need another one.
In the village of Imni Natala, located in Al-Haus province, most residents now inhabit temporary shelters, their homes obliterated by the earthquake. Urgent aid is their lifeline. 3 small trucks, laden with livestock, arrived at the village.
I lost my mother and brothers during the earthquake. I was in Marrakesh, and my father was in Kazan. Only my father and I survived, sadly.
Local philanthropists from the As al-Zaq region in the south come to their aid. distributing livestock to the residents of Iminatala. Despite this generous gesture, some non-governmental organizations implore Moroccan authorities to intensify their efforts to support these frigid areas during the winter months.
Our tents are insufficient, with only about 18 tents for many families. People are using plastic and mats to construct makeshift shelters. However, strong winds frequently sweep through, leaving us exposed.
A similar ordeal unfolds in the village of Otgri, where earthquake survivors seek refuge in a local school after their homes crumbled. They endure cold nights within classrooms with cracked walls. Due to limited space, some are forced to sleep in the schoolyard. These villages bear the weight of profound suffering in the aftermath of an earthquake described as the deadliest since 1960.
Leaders of the Geneva Group to support Western Sahara stress the responsibility of the international community to complete the decolonization of Western Sahara and the special responsibility of Spain as the former colonial power. In a symposium organized by the group on the sidelines of the 54th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, which kicked off last Monday, the Zimbabwean ambassador and head of the group stressed that international law is at stake and that the time has come to get rid of double standards, as well as to accelerate the self-determination referendum and ensure the respect of human rights in Western Sahara. A joint military operation conducted by the Somali Army Forces and international partners in central Somalia has resulted in the elimination of 30 members of the terrorist Al-Shabaab movement. This operation, which took place in the Galmudug state, is part of a broader campaign against Al-Shabaab in southern and central Somalia. During the campaign, more than 80 cities and regions were liberated by the army. The tiny Italian islands of Lampedusa is struggling to cope with a surge in migrant boats from North Africa after numbers peaked at 7,000 people. Lampedusa, a small island in the Mediterranean, has been circled by asylum seekers, with the number of those arriving outnumbering its entire population. Nabil Khazini has the report.
There are thousands here stranded in the Italian island of Lampedusa. The number is surging, and they keep coming. Around 2,000 of migrants arriving from Africa have reached the island on Wednesday alone, bringing the total number of migrants here in the small island to around 7,000. This is more than Lampedusa's capacity, whose population is even lesser than the number of migrants. The local reception center, which can only house fewer than 400 people, is now overwhelmed.
After a particularly challenging day like yesterday, today people are being continuously transferred. The current situation inside the hotspot is about 4,200 people. However, it is still decreasing. The situation is certainly complex, and we are gradually trying to return to normality.
Migrants here are waiting to be transferred to reception centers in other areas that are also full. The Italian authorities say nearly 126,000 migrants reached Italy by sea this year, nearly double the number at the time last year. This has toughened Italy's ability to cope with migrant landing. Rome blames Europe for this.
I said it at the beginning. What is happening on Lampedusa is the death of Europe. The dead baby in a migrant boat accident on Wednesday represents the death of Europe. It's political, cultural, social, and value death, because Italy is alone.
Lampedusa, located between Tunisia and Malta, is the first landing port for many migrants seeking to reach the European Union. The island has long been a flashpoint in Europe's migration crisis.
And the United Nations Human Rights Body has received reports of at least 13 mass graves in the Sudanese city of Al-Junaynah. A special envoy to the war-torn country told the UN Security Council Wednesday. The mass graves are believed to contain civilians from the ethnic Masali tribe who were killed in attacks by the paramilitary rapid support forces, according to UN envoy Volker Volker Perthes. Perthes, who announced he was stepping down as the UN Special Representative for Sudan, added that the human rights violations were being documented and, if verified, may constitute war crimes. 2 people were injured from rubber bullets fired by Zionist forces, while dozens suffered from suffocation due to inhaling tear gas heavily fired in the town of Beita, south of Nablus, during confrontations with the occupation forces. The army stormed the town of Beita in the early hours of dawn, raided several homes in various parts, and conducted a field investigation with the Palestinians while obstructing the movement of the people in and out of the besieged town. Still with the Palestinian cause, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs denounced the ongoing Zionist repressive measures against the Palestinian people, such as imposing a comprehensive seal off the West Bank and Gaza Strip under the pretext of Jewish holidays. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry in a statement said that the Zionist occupation use of holiday pretext is a scandalous use of religion for colonial purposes.
The ministry strongly condemns the procedures and measures that the occupation continuously imposes on our people on the eve of Jewish holidays, as in imposing a comprehensive seal-off on the Palestinian areas on the eve of Rosh Hashanah. This is a blatant use of religious events for colonial purposes and a misleading hint to the international public opinion, the aim of which is to bring more charges against the victim and acquit the perpetrator, in addition to the economic and social damages that our people pay as a result of imposing such seal-offs.
The European Union's top diplomat warned Kosovo and Serbia risking being left behind on their path toward membership of the bloc unless they acted to reduce tensions in Serb-dominated north of Kosovo. EU High Representative Joseph Borrell met with Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić and Kosovo Prime Minister Albin Kurti earlier to find a way to defuse tensions after violence erupted in North Kosovo in late May, when ethnic Albanian mayors took office following boycotted local elections by Serbs.
Today we again urge both parties to take immediate action in the north of Kosovo to de-escalate the situation, to avoid any further destabilization, and to enable new early local elections to take place immediately. We cannot sit and wait for the next crisis. This has to take place immediately in line with the requests made by the European Union and the broader international community.
And as highlighted in our top stories, the Russian presidency said President Vladimir Putin has gratefully accepted North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's invitation to visit North Korea. The Kremlin confirmed the trip after the two men held a rare summit in Russia's Far East. This comes after the Russian president hosted Kim Jong-un in Russia, where both held bilateral talks.
It was agreed that contacts will continue at various levels. In particular, the visit of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov to Pyongyang will now be quickly prepared, which we expect will take place in October. But also during a one-on-one conversation, Kim Jong-un invited Putin to visit North Korea. Putin gratefully accepted this invitation. All further coordination will continue through diplomatic channels.
In the same context, Washington said it's troubling that Russia is talking about cooperation with North Korea on programs that potentially would violate UN Security Council resolutions. The White House said the Biden administration won't hesitate to impose more sanctions on Russia and North Korea if they conclude any new arms deals.
When you see Kim Jong-un vowing to provide full, unconditional support for Russia's so-called sacred fight to defend its security interests, which of course is not what it's doing with respect to the war in Ukraine, that of course is troubling. When you see what looks to be increased cooperation and probably military transfers, as we've said for some time, we have reason to believe they were going to discuss military transfers, that is quite troubling and would potentially be in violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions.
The White House has defended the prisoner exchange agreement between the US and Iran, which faced criticism from Republicans. It emphasized that Tehran does not receive sanctions relief from the US as part of the agreement. Sanctions on Iran were lifted by the US, allowing for the transfer of $6 billion in Iranian funds from South Korea to Qatar, as stipulated in a previously announced prisoner exchange deal. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby clarified that the operation was not linked to ransom.
If Iran tries to divert the funds, we'll take action and we'll lock them up again. I also want to be clear. This is not a payment of any kind. It's not ransom. These aren't U.S. taxpayer dollars. And we haven't lifted a single one of our sanctions on Iran. Iran will be getting no sanctions relief.
Beijing has declared the achievement of a strategic partnership with Venezuela during the visit of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, resulting in fundamental outcomes. According to Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning, numerous cooperation agreements were signed, and consensus was reached in various areas, including the economy, trade, culture, tourism, and space. China pledged continued support for Venezuela's sovereignty and social stability, as well as its commitment to resisting external interference.
The visit of Venezuelan President Maduro has yielded substantive results. The two sides issued a joint statement on establishing a strategic partnership between China and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We have signed dozens of cooperation agreements and together reached consensus in various fields, including economy, trade, culture, tourism, space and aviation, civil science, technology, and media. China will continue to support Venezuela in its efforts to safeguard its national sovereignty and social stability, and will also support Venezuela's just commitment to opposing external interference.
And for more international news, let's follow this report.
In Portugal's northern Barroso region, the European Union's drive for clean energy is coming up against local opposition. Activists are protesting against plans to mine lithium, essential for electric vehicle batteries. Portugal could become one of Europe's biggest producers of the resource as the EU attempts to reduce its dependence on places like China by producing more of the raw materials needed for green technology at home. Portugal is already Europe's biggest producer of lithium, with over 66,000 tons of known reserves.
Residents of Croatian towns close to the Bosnian border are worried by an apparent increase in the number of migrants crossing and passing through the area on their journey to other EU countries. The area lies across the border from the Bosnian towns of Velika Kladuša and Bihać, where migrants from Africa, Asia and the Middle East have often congregated, sometimes camping in forests and abandoned buildings, hoping for a chance to cross into the EU.
India's southern state of Kerala shut some schools, offices and public transport services as they scrambled to limit the spread of the rare and deadly brain-damaging Nipah virus that has killed 2 people, with 3 more testing positive. The state is battling its 4th outbreak since 2018 of a virus for which there is no vaccine and which spreads through contact with the body fluids or infected bats, pigs or people, killing up to 75 of those infected. Kerala's first Nipah outbreak killed 21 of the 23 infected, while subsequent outbreaks in 2019 and 2021 killed 2 people.
A species of snail once extinct in the wild has been reintroduced to French Polynesia after a 15,000-kilometer journey from Britain. More than 1,600 of the tiny Patula snails were released on the volcanic island of Moria by intervertebrate specialist Tyrone Capel. The release is part of a years-long project with more than 24,000 snails released since 2015. According to the Zoological Society of London, each year's release of snails is painted with a different color. A fluorescent snail vanish which glows in the dark and allows researchers to track them at night.
And to football now, eyes will be shifted to the Saudi city of Taif, where the highly anticipated CAF Super Cup match between USM Algiers and the Egyptian Al Ahly will take place at the King Fahd Stadium. USM Algiers aim to enter history and win their first African Super Cup trophy and being the second Algerian club to lift the CAF Super Cup after ASF Setif edged Ahly in a dramatic penalty shootout in 2015. Al Ahly has won 8 African Super Cup trophies and last 2. This makes Al Ahly the most successful club in this competition. And that's it for tonight's edition. If you missed any part of it, you can check our social media platform. Thank you for joining us. See you tomorrow.